let's discuss what might possibly be, going based off of public reception, the most disappointing album of 2021. I, like many others, tuned into this Roddy Ricch album, Live Life Fast. But unlike others, I didn't really have, massive expectations. I didn't follow the Roddy Ricch rollout this time around. I wasn't really tuned into what he was doing. Honestly, if we're talking about following Roddy Ricch's career, I haven't been that in tune with it outside of the features that he's been a part of since The Box. So realistically speaking, my level of expectation for this record was slim. It was very low. Not to say that I thought it would be bad, but just to say that I didn't really care if he dropped mid or dropped anything great. If he dropped something great, I would call it great. If he dropped something bad, I'd call it bad, not make a big deal about it. So what I did was a little homework, and I saw that Roddy Ricch had been promoting this album as almost the second coming of Christ, even though we hadn't seen a first instance of that in his career. I want to preface this also by saying I think a lot of the people who are disappointed in this record have unrealistic expectations of Roddy Ricch, because at least from my experience listening to dude's music, I never thought that he was, that crazy. I thought he was cool. I would enjoy his music casually, but the way people reacted to this album coming out was almost like Kendrick Lamar dropping To Pimp a Butterfly before, and then he goes silent for 2 years, and then in 2017 decides to drop a record similar to the quality of Huncho Jack Jack Huncho, and people absolutely shitting on him for that. Now, had he dropped a record with the quality of To Pimp a Butterfly, or something that was just so revolutionary or genre bending or boundary pushing, or with the conceptual genius of something like that record, then I could see people having the reaction to Live Life Fast that they have. But in all actuality, it's just a mid album. It's not trash. It's not crazy. This isn't the worst thing I've ever heard. It's just boring. Y'all killed this man. Like, for what? Because he dropped some mid? He'd still be alive right now if you niggas ain't gas him up. He didn't drop a classic with Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial. It was a decent record back then. But let's get into his level of responsibility. Did he hype this record up? Yes. Did he make it seem like this was a no-skip record? Did he make it seem like this record was going to be so monumental and mind-boggling? Did he put an idea in his audience's mind that this was going to be his hands-down, without a doubt, best work ever? Sure. But my experience in listening to artists is they're all liars. And I don't believe you until you prove that you are actually going to put out what you say you're going to put out. So already Roddy Ricch, in my opinion, isn't doing anything outside of what any other artist would do when they're promoting their new record. They're hyping it up, saying it's going to be good. I don't have any proof of that. I don't have any singles that you've dropped. There's nothing to give me the indication that you are going to drop a great record outside of people holding you to the great year you had in 2019, which, let me remind you again, was okay at best. If we're not including The Box, Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial is an okay album, and there's nothing wrong with that. Let's talk about what Roddy Ricch did wrong. Number one, he went 2 years without dropping any music. This is another reason why I try my best to look at artists as realistically as humanly possible, because if you start to believe your own hype, I feel like you'll start to believe that you are significantly better than you actually are. Like I said, not discrediting Roddy Ricch. I think he's a talented artist, but I don't think he is at the level that if he drops a mid project, people should be surprised. That same audience propels you up and kind of convinces you that, you're doing so much more, or you're that much more extraordinary than any other artist in your same lane. I think he starts to believe that the success of a record like The Box is just off of the merit of his own artistry, and not because of how viral it went on TikTok, not because of how much more people wanted to play the song, despite Justin Bieber trying to get his song to number one, despite Selena Gomez trying to get her song to the number one. The internet in general kind of having this celebratory camaraderie around Roddy Ricch beating out white and white passing pop stars. I mean, that's another part of the reason why I wanted The Box to be successful, just despite those two. So I believe Roddy Ricch at some point believed that a majority of the success of that record was just down to the fact that he was just that great of an artist. Well, fast forward, he goes 2 years without releasing any music. And that's okay, because you should be okay with artists having their success, celebrating their victories. The Box was a victory for Roddy Ricch. I don't care what you want to say. Probably was enjoying fruits of that labor, the fruits of that song for a while. It's okay to do that. It's not the best when we're talking about experience as an artist. What's happening in that time frame? I mean, how are you growing as an artist? How are you going to beat out your recent efforts? It's me speaking, realistically viewing your records and your quality and your discography. What you've released Isn't that crazy? Antisocial was his debut album, and niggas got on Twitter acting like because Live Life Fast was less entertaining than that record, that Antisocial was somehow All Eyes on Me. So let's talk about Live Life Fast. I thought the intro to this album was fucking beautiful. The minute I heard that, I was like, yo, either these niggas are hating or Roddy Ricch done something in his past that I just don't know about. Because this has all the little, nuggets to be a great record just off the intro alone. The way the intro comes in, it kind of is giving me a little bit of a 90210 vibe without the vocals. Roddy Ricch is getting real introspective, letting us know kind of like this message that he's been told already about how trying to get shit fast is going to lead to a bad outcome. Kind of funny, that's what the content on this record kind of led it to being. I mean, he's talking on the record like extensively about taking his time, basically insinuating that he's putting his best foot forward to drop stuff that's gonna last. So it's almost like the title of this record is to completely go against that narrative of trying to attain everything fast. So the next track, Thailand, I was introduced to essentially the same Roddy Ricch that I'm used to. He's not dropping like crazy lines, although on this record I noticed that a lot of them were like way more embarrassing than usual. It's a beat that I could see him and a myriad of other artists in his lane rapping over as well. I think he's riding it well enough, but as usual, he goes on for too long on the record, and it basically ends up becoming too monotonous for me to care about what he's saying on the album anymore. But is it a passable song? Is it listenable? Yeah, I play it again. Then we get into All Good with Future, and this is like where I'm starting to see like, what the fuck were you doing for 2 years? Flows aren't like suited to the song at all, and I guess if his rapping were a little bit more, creative, his lyricism was a bit more stand out. His flows would be a little bit more tolerable, but it seems like he's just experimenting with different flows just for the sake of experimenting, and he's just coming off of the beat awkward. Rollercoastin is a standard Roddy Ricch song. I don't know why people are acting like this song is trash. It's okay, it might be trash. However, if you've liked Roddy Ricch before, you've heard this song already. Why y'all acting like this nigga punches babies? Hibachi with 21 and Kodak Black is basically carried by 21 Savage. I loved his feature. Roddy Ricch is talking about taking his girl to hibachi and hirachis. And it's at this point in the album that I'm kind of understanding that he's playing into the Live Life Fast narrative, just unintentionally. I thought that the point of the intro was to go against it as we listened to the album and we started to see him focus more on the content. But as I listened to the record more, it's clear he don't give a fuck about that. And whatever advice that he was acting like was bad in the intro actually hit home for him. Murder One, I don't know why every artist is forcing Fivio to be on a drill beat. Like, I get it, but can we give him something else to work with from time to time so we can see his other artistic abilities? I don't even remember him on the song. Jamie Foxx doesn't have a feature, which is fucking ridiculous considering how hidden of a great gem he is in terms of R&B music. Don't I is Gunna's song, 100%. And I hate saying that because it basically puts me in a position where I have to give Gunna credit. And y'all know I hate this man. I don't really hate Gunna, okay? I just hate the way he dresses. Gunna is what you would get if you mixed Ray Charles with a stud. Crash the Party is a track that I completely, I like the title of it because after I listened to it, I'm like, yeah, this nigga just killed the vibe. Everything You Need, I was just like surprised that he was singing this badly, unironically. Move to Miami, I'm just listening to the song like, why? It's a minute and a half of basically nothing. And once we get into the song, it's typical verse from Roddy, typical verse from Baby. I don't know why you would get Alex Isley and Dolla for a track that's under a minute long after you just dropped a track with Jamie Foxx where he doesn't get a feature either. More Than a Trend pissed me off only because that's what he came off as when I listened to this record, is less than a trend. Because at the very least, Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial had the box, which was trendy as fuck, and people were able to get some kind of replay value and replay factor out of it. Then I noticed the next track is Late at Night, a track that before this album dropped, I wasn't really that big of a fan of. I thought it was passable, but then I look at the track list and I'm like, this is the best song on the album. Now I'm forced to admit that the track that I felt was mid when it came out is the best track on an album full of mid. But like I said before, this is not a trash album. Like, it's passable, it's listenable, it's no worse than other records that have dropped this year. Y'all really want to have an honest conversation? This is on the same level as Certified Lover Boy, same level as Young Thug's most recent album, on the same level as Meek Mill's Expensive Pain. A lot of the records that I put in my worst albums for this year weren't just because they were just that bad. Oftentimes it was because the artist didn't do anything. They were so stagnant in creativity that their trajectory went from a possible uptrend to just flat or even below what they were before. And when we're talking about Roddy Ricch, like I said, if I'm going off of his output from the past couple years, he hasn't done anything that would lead me to believe that the trajectory of his career is nowhere but up. I had hope for him, but I'm more surprised that people expected more from this album other than for it to be just okay at best. I don't think that he should be like almost album shamed because he dropped mid. I don't think he was ready, you know? He took a 2-year break, had massive success, dropped an album assuming that people were going to be as receptive or as kind to his breakout year. He should have dropped more music as those years progressed so that he could get a feel for what people genuinely wanted from him, so he could get a feel for the type of artistic growth he might need to undergo to keep people satisfied for a full album. I mean, this album had 18 songs on it. As I'm listening to the record, Roddy is providing zero versatility, essentially. And he'll sing every now and again, which I've already admitted, when it comes to the context of this record, is genuinely bad. Conceptually, I feel like this album fails because the point that it's trying to drive home in the beginning is that you shouldn't live life fast, but the content on the record, the amount of time I feel like he put into his lyricism, I feel like that's exactly what he tried to do. Just like it ends up landing whoever he was talking about in the beginning in prison, it landed him not really selling, that well with this album in comparison to his previous. It's still a W. He still sold over 50,000. Another thing I noticed on this album is that, surprisingly, the hooks are horrible. I mean, the attempts at good hooks are bad. The hooks themselves are bad. So low energy to the point where it's like, it feels like he's doing a reference track for himself, just not going back to change any of the verses. His lack of enthusiasm and energy on this album kind of sometimes border 2014 to 2015 Big Shawn, which I didn't even know was an emulation possible for Roddy Ricch. I would call this album vulnerable as often as he tries to play into the relationship tropes. But even when we get into the relationship tropes, they don't feel authentic. They just feel like cash grabs or attempts at trying to have another viral moment. Relationship-driven cuts don't feel like you put any effort into the relationship at all, so why the fuck would I put any effort into the song either? Oh, I have a strange opinion of this album because I want to call it trash, but my level of expectation for it was just so, I guess, baseline that I can't even be mad that he dropped mid. I'm genuinely not mad at this album in any capacity, and I kind of saw it coming. I'm just taking it as an it is what it is, as opposed to like, we gotta stand outside of his house with like picket fences or some shit, because that's the way some of y'all are acting on social media. Like he went outside and stomped out Betty White. But did Roddy hype this album up? Sure. But did he give any content the past few years before this drop to give people the indication that he would be dropping a classic? No. I get being hopeful, but being disappointed to a point where Roddy Ricch is now immediately trashed because the sophomore album didn't stand up to the somewhat decent debut album, it's just kind of crazy to me. I think people are overreacting. Not bad. There isn't anything about him that's just like so egregiously horrible about this record that he couldn't come back from it with another good album release. So Roddy Ricch with this record, not his best, obviously. I just don't like the big deal that's being made about it. And yes, a part of that is his fault, but it also is massive overreaction from the fan base as well. But hey, at least they're able to admit when their artist drops some mid, unlike some. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. Thank y'all for watching. I'll see you in the next one, and until next time, yeah, I'm out. Peace.